Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Denham, LeBlanc, Schultz,
Here.
Pinkley.
Here.
Williams,
Here.
Stepp. Milton,
Here.
McBratney. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. On our agenda, we start off with the approval of our Finance Committee minutes for January 23rd, regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Point of order. I'd like to make a comment on the minutes before we approve them.
Oh,
We had discussions at the last meeting, and I realize it wasn't a motion, but I'd be happy to make an motion at this meeting if that's what it takes to get in the minutes, that there were two things we specifically discussed and had agreement on that aren't reflected in here. One is that for the Finance Committee meeting, that monthly report, or the reports for the Finance Committee would be submitted 1 week in advance of the meeting. And the second one was that we were going to have more details on our spend with the CVB. So I'd make a motion that we amend the minutes to that effect.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Glenn, I was not in attendance, but I did go back and watch the meeting. What I got out of that was I heard you make that request. I didn't know that that was a committee request. I heard that as one request.
As I said, if we need to make it a motion, I'd be happy to do that, but our finance director also agreed to be able to submit the reports a week in advance.
Okay, well, let me just give a brief recap on how the world works. This is a committee, and all committees, including our Board of Aldermen, we speak as a committee, not as individuals. Individuals, we encourage all individuals on any committee or the alderman to openly and freely share their opinions. However, it is a committee, and so for anything to move forward, it's not being moved forward by one request, it is a committee request. And then, if the committee requests something, in this example, in a finance meeting, our finance director does not report to this committee. Our finance director reports to Kathy. That's her sole reporting obligation. So if our committee decided to do something, then it would be on Kathy's responsibility to make that happen by working with whichever director would be required. So, like I said, I went back and watched it. I heard your request. If it was something that the committee agreed upon, then Kathy would have taken action on that. Sure.
Thank you, Alderman Schultz and Mayor. Just a couple of quick things regarding the meeting today. I was still going to work with Allison to comply with the request, even though it wasn't a formal motion. And you're right, Mayor, to lay that out again on how the committee system works, so that's very helpful. We don't have a problem supplying the materials a week in advance. This particular meeting was a special meeting called that just had to do with wrapping up and rolling over some funds from the 24 budget, predominantly, into the 25 budget item lines. So it's not a regular finance meeting where there's a lot more material for you all to go over, like what you'll see in the April meeting coming up, and you'll get that material in at least a week's notice before that meeting. But when it comes to special ones that we have to meet certain calendar obligations to be able to present in front of the Board of Aldermen, that's why this one was done quicker than what would be usual and customary. So just to give you some background on that. So thank you for your patience and understanding.
And what was the second request you had, Glenn?
Additional details on the city spend with the CVB.
Additional,
Allison will be going over a breakdown with you all today in the different categories of spend.
for the CVB specifically? Okay. Any other comments from any committee members?
No, I think it's a fair request, and the whole transparency movement that this administration has. There's a degree of grace that comes with the adjustment, knowing we've had some turnover. But I agree. Historically, we want to represent what commentary was had during the last meeting, so that makes sense. And then I would also say that if we want to make this a formal expectation, we should formalize it by a motion so that there's no nothing left off the table for anybody moving forward, so it's explicitly clear.
Yep, thank you, Alex. That's the proper way to do it. So we have two motions. He's asking to amend the minutes. Yeah. So is there any other discussion on amending our minutes from February meeting, or January meeting? Sorry. Nope. Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Should we do this individually? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So the motion passed. The motion to amend the minutes has passed. Now we need to vote to approve the amended minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Next is the 2024 budget amendments. And look at Ben, he's going to share.
What you've got on the wall is the 25. You can go back to the 24. So while she's doing that, just as an overview of what we typically do on an annual basis, well, first of all, I'll back up. My name is Ben Hart. I work with Baker Tilly. I've been around Branson for, I guess, 3-4 years now, working with budget and accounting, finance. And I'm glad to be back. It's been a while since I've been back to Branson. More so my daughter's thankful because she's in Springfield and got a really good meal last night. So she says thank you. So a little bit about our budget process. State of Missouri requires budgets to be passed on an annual basis on every fund that we have. Those funds cannot go over budget, and if they do require to be over budget, then we come to you as a body to approve, well, I guess, recommend approval for that budget to be increased. So this is just the 24 year-end budget amendments. Excuse me. And this usually happens February or March, only because we needed the two months to end, to start in 25, in order to capture a lot of the data we needed for 2024. And why I say that, the bulk of these amendments really have to do with our economic development bonds. So the sales tax and the economic development, or the economic taxes we receive that go back out, we need to be able to collect those, which in Missouri and any other state really in the Midwest, sales tax is 2 months in arrears. So we've got to have January and February in order to identify what needs to get transferred out to the other funds. So what you have in front of you is a list. It seems like it's really rolled up high level, but the detail down in this is only going to be probably 1, maybe 2 line items at the most. The top 3 are, as you can tell, they're economic development based. These are all bond issues, bond payments, if you will, principal payments that goes out to the debt service payments that's made, especially the $3.5 million. The description of the aquarium at the boardwalk, that's money that goes out from that fund into other funds. IDA Branson Hills, that's a bond issue payment. The Branson Landing the same way. So these are not just the original bond issues. This is actually on top of what's already been budgeted. So what we do on an annual basis, we'll budget the actual payment that's due that year, Anything above that, we come back to you to be able to amend the budget and then go ahead and make that payment too. So that's what this is, a surplus payment, if you will. That's what those top three are. The next one's the next group that says transfer from, transfer to. Down the left-hand column, those are the funds that are getting amended. So the first and the third one is called ARPA. That's the money we had received from the feds two years ago. What this does is just close those funds out because at the end of '24, they needed to be obligated. This makes them obligated and spent. So they were transferred over to the general fund and they'll transfer to public safety police. Not big amounts, but they still needed to clean those funds out and get them zeroed out. So when you report them, they're zero. The general fund to economic development fund is Social Birdie. That's the revenue that comes out of there and goes back into economic development for Social Birdie, the project itself. And then we have a number of funds that are getting transferred out of fund into 440 capital projects. So the way this works is operating funds will have on the left-hand side, capital funds on the right. Any money that's appropriated out of an operating fund for a capital project gets moved over into a capital fund. And the reason we do that is just to be able to capture the capital assets, if you will, a lot easier for auditors. Because if it's buried in the operating funds, it's somewhat difficult to go through and comb through all that. So that transfer is made. What this is doing is fully funding those projects we had. Now, this is a little bit of a change in the way we're doing business because we've got Allison here and cleaning some of this stuff up, finally. But what this does is if a project's approved, the cash goes there to spend on the project. In the past, we'd only funded what was spent, and that was it. What that does is create an inflated cash balance that's appropriated, but nobody knows for what. The accounting for it is really difficult. In this case, we can transfer the money over, the project's fully funded. We don't have to have this anymore because you've already approved the project once. You shouldn't have to prove it twice, 3, 4 times on top of contracts you're already looking at. So that kind of cleans this up too. And when you look at debt service for Branson Landing, you see the rest of those, with the exception of the general fund in the middle there, all the rest of those are really economic development money. That's money that's come out of one fund, for instance, transportation fund is the second one from the bottom. Transportation fund receives sales tax, right? Sales tax from all the retailers within the city. Some of those retailers are in TIFs. So what we do is we'll pull that apart. The ones that are in TIFs gets transferred over to the TIF itself. And that's another thing Alice and I are talking about cleaning up. There's an administrative process here, a burden that obviously with her guidance can be changed pretty easy and make it a lot easier to do this. And eliminate that too. And that's just depositing those funds directly into the funds they go to. So we don't have to do all the transfers around. Now back up to the general fund. The general fund, there's 2 items that general fund. You see the $120,146. There's a Cisco switch and then elevator upgrade. Elevator's the biggest thing on there is $71,000 that needed to be increased because of the project itself. That is the 24 budget amendments. And this is something we do every year. I know Allison and myself, we'd like to get this down to a very minimal number of line items where we only need to do the ones that are critical. My goal is to, and hers too, is to try to get it down to just those economic development purposes. Because when the public sees this, they're not going to know what this is. And they're not going to have me to listen to, not that I would want myself to listen to, but it's complex, and we just need to simplify it for the public too. So that's 24 budget amendments. I'd be happy to answer any questions I can.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you very much, Ben.
You bet.
And thank you, Allison.
Can you blow that up? There we go. Okay, so this is the second one. The second The second budget, this is this year's budget we're amending. So we'll approve a capital project for '25. During the budget process, we assume that capital project's ideally spent all in 1 year. No, that's ridiculous. It's not all going to be spent in 1 year. But what we do is allocate that funding for that 1 year. It may take 2 years, it may take 18 months. It'll lapse over a couple of years. Within the state of Missouri, again, you can't just roll the money over without having board approval. So what we have here is money that had been allocated for '24, for whatever reason, couldn't be spent and needs to go strategically into a '25 budget. So all this is doing is taking that cash that would otherwise been spent in '24, moving it to '25 and giving the authorization to continue. If you scroll down, I'll go back to the top, but if you scroll down to the 13 million, there we go. The 13.7 million, these are all projects, right? These are projects that just need to get transferred over, rolled over to the next year. They've been approved, nothing's been increased here. It's just a matter of moving money from the left hand into the right hand and continue the construction. A good example is historic downtown. We'd allocated money in '24 for that, knowing we got the money, we're going to set it aside, knowing it's going to take a number of years to get to the final conclusion of that. You may see this again next year. Depends on how much is there. Again, if Allison and I can come up with a way we're just reporting this out to you and don't have to have an amendment, we're going to do that. Because in my mind, you're really allocating this and approving it twice. Once in the budget process, and second, just say, oh yeah, we need to spend it in 22 or 25. So those are all capital projects. The 620 up there, the water sewer fund, again, capital projects and a little bit of equipment in there. And then down lower, the 16.3 million, those are all capital projects. We do have some operating up at the top. And that's in the general fund. And this isn't unusual either, to be able to transfer money, again, out of operating into the 25. Because if there's expectations of something getting done, for one reason or another, just doesn't get done that year, goes into the next year. I know one of our clients had a comprehensive plan that they were doing, and they couldn't get any bidders on their bid, so they had to transfer it over to 25 in order to get that. And that's not a small amount of money. But they took it out of the 24, move it over to 25 to continue what that governing body expected to happen. And that's what this does, is just continue that process. I don't, and Allison doesn't purport to be an expert in any of these. That's why we've got the esteemed staff here that can answer any of the questions. They know what they're doing, and I know Allison worked really close with these guys in order to pull this together. And I think in the 3 years that we've been here, this is probably the most transparent this process has ever been, because it's usually rolled up into several line items nobody understands. Obviously, she's got ideas, we could pull it out even more, but this gives you everything you need to know from 24 to 25. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Glenn?
There was a discussion at the beginning of the planning budget for '25 that we had a notion, I think it was brought forward by Alex, to have this fund for being able to facilitate raising of buildings. I want to say it was $750,000, something like that. Are we funding that in this process now?
Good question.
Is that in there? I don't think it is. It's already in the 25 budget.
Already, okay.
Yeah, and just a quick update on that, since you brought it up, Alderman. We're still getting legal guidance on that to make sure that we've got the authority as a fourth-class city to implement. So we'll keep you tuned in.
Any other questions from committee? Michael?
I had one. It was related to the rollover in the 301. ARPA
Could you
fund.
pull your mic up a little bit, do you? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. The rollover, the 301, I thought that the money had to be committed, and so in 25 on the rollover, it shows up again. 70,000 rolling forward. Is that still in the budget, or? is it committed?
So actually, we received an additional 70,000 from ARPA because they had funding that cities didn't spend, and then they reallocated it out to projects that had additional expenses that ARPA fund didn't cover. So our parks project actually got additional funding this year, and so that's why we had to amend the ARPA funding to allocate the 70,000 that we're going to receive from ARPA.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ben. And next item is our year-end financials. That Allison?
So these are our fourth quarter financials for 2024. If you want to go to the next slide, you'll see this is gross sales tax revenue for all government funds. In 2024, we saw a 1% increase in overall sales tax revenue and a decrease in tourism tax revenue. The next slide is just general fund revenues and expenditures. For the general fund, revenues including transfers decreased by 1.1%, and expenses including transfers decreased by 186,000. On the next slide, it's broken down, and we've taken the transfers out of expenses because that overstates the expense balance. So we wanted to kind of break out, hey, what are the transfers and what are the actual expenses out of this fund? And then you'll see also revenues on that screen. On this, it shows 2023 actual against 2024 budget and 2024 actual. Go back to the previous, thank you. General fund tax revenue, just the tax revenue increased by 1.63% in 2024. Total general fund revenues, excluding transfers, decreased by 1% in 2024. This decrease is explained by the sale of capital assets that we had in 2023. There was such an increase in sale of capital assets in 2023 that we didn't have in 2024. Therefore, we see a decrease in revenue. General fund expenses, excluding transfers, was $12,036,549 in 2024, and general fund expenditures excluding transfers came in $2.1 million under budget, which is 15% less than the 2024 budgeted expenditures. If you want to go to the next slide. So this graph kind of shows like what makes up general fund revenue. You can see that sales tax is 56% of total general fund revenue, and that's our main source of revenue in the general fund, with ad valorem tax, which is property tax, being second at 18%. On the next chart, you'll see the expenditures broken down by department. So finance and planning and development are your biggest departments in your general fund, and the general fund is broken down between 13 different departments. So right here, this is public safety funds. This is fire and police public safety funds. In 2024, revenues excluding transfers increased by 4.57%, and expenditures and transfers out increased by $7 million. This increase is related to 2024 capital projects, and the ending fund balance for public safety was $5 million. On the next slide, you'll see just the public safety police funds, which you can see revenue, expenses, and transfers out. Revenue for the police department increased due to the bond for the new police facility. Expenses, excluding transfers, came in $1.9 million less than 2024 budget. Transfers out of the police department public safety fund include operating transfers to the police internal service fund and to capital projects. These capital projects include the police building project and patrol body armor. On the next slide, you'll see public safety fire fund, which is also broken down by revenue, expenses, and transfers out.
Allison, I'm just going to interrupt real quick. Let's dwell for a moment and
Okay.
because my old eyes, right?
Yes.
And there's older eyes than mine on this committee, need to absorb a little bit, so just.
Are you
can
referring to me?
No, sir. No, sir. Michael, down on
Michael.
the end. Yes, bless him. Can you go back to the previous slide
For
just real
sure.
quick?
Yes.
This has been a really important thing that's really, it's visible for the public. They're very interested in this. So just go over that one more time, please.
Yeah, so this is public safety funds for the police department alone. You can see that revenues is $19 million. This increase in revenue is due to the bond proceeds that we did to get the police department. The expenses are $8.6 million for 2024, and then the transfers out are $4.2 million. A lot of these transfers are for capital projects, and the police and building were major capital projects for the police fund, which was transferred to the capital projects for police, and then patrol body armor. And then total revenue increased, which which I don't have the percentage calculated on that spreadsheet. But, and then expenses excluding transfers came in $1.9 million under budget. Yes.
Remember in the budget process a couple of years ago, the public safety fund, both fire and police, received money from the general fund. Eons back, right? I'm not going to invigorate the Bible, but the money that comes over from the general fund, the governing body made an effort to actually solidify what comes over to that. You can see in the revenue that she's got here, in '23, that's typically the size of this fund. It's usually not 19 million. Like Allison had said, we issued a bond in '24 for the building. That money went in here. And this is another case where money came into the operating fund, it's going right back out, right? So the process here, again, this is an operating fund. It could go over to the capital projects fund and stay there and never come to the operating. It just all depends on how we set that process up. So I wanted to point that out. Now I don't want you to go back a few slides, but back a few slides, you saw general fund in the sales tax. Sales tax was up by 1%. I think we held that flat for '24's budget and '25's budget. And that was a big, we don't know what's going to happen with the political environment. No matter what side you fall on, economy is the economy. And that's what we see. So we left that flat. We saw a 3% decrease in tourism tax. We saw that coming. So we decreased sales tax, I think it was, or tourism tax, I think it was 5%. It was a lot bigger decrease than what we had. So what you also have in the packet is the financials for the operating funds, and you'll see those, and if she goes through them, you can see the surplus that's coming into the general fund because of the way the governing body budgets. You budget conservative revenue and long on expenses, knowing that they're going to meet, and you'll end up with a surplus. And we've done that for, 3 years in a row, Mayor?
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. And that's worked out very well.
If you want to go to the next slide. So this is
Allison,
public, yes.
I'm sorry, would you pull the mic up a little closer, please? Thank you.
So this is public safety fire fund, and revenue increased by 3.84% over 2023. Expenditures excluding transfers were 33% less than budgeted for 2024, and transfers out include operating transfers to the Fire Internal Service Fund and transfers to capital projects. The capital projects for the fire department were Fire Station 4 and emergency reporting software were two of their major capital projects that were transferred in 2024. This is the tourism fund, including transfers in and out. In 2024, revenues and transfers in are $1,213 greater than 2023. And like Ben just said, we kept those revenues flat because we didn't want to overstate our over budget revenues and then not receive those funds. So that's pretty good that we're right there. We met those goals on budgeted funds, and it's not much more than 2023, and we're not expecting much more because we're not budgeting growth in those funds. And then the ending fund balance for tourism was $43 million at the end of 2024. On the next slide. Yep.
That's a lot of money, 43 million. We've got a lot of projects out that's allocated toward. That's one of the things you and I were talking about this morning is just for the general public, that sounds like a lot of money, but look at all the projects that Kendall's got to get done. If he can't do them, I know Michael will.
Thank you, Ben.
And then this is tourism sales tax year to date, year over year. And tourism tax revenue excluding transfers in actually increased by 2.7%. Expenses excluding transfers decreased by 1.5 million when compared to 2023. And transfers out include operating transfers to the general fund and transfers to debt service. And then with this fund, we do have a big ending fund balance, and that's why we're trying to clean up those capital projects. So then we know like what's funded by what source, and then we're not seeing those huge ending fund balances, and they're really tied to our projects. So then we can tie what revenue is to all those capital projects that are outstanding. Here you'll see transportation funds, including transfers in and out as of 12/31. 2024 tax revenue and interest income increased by 1.86%. And then 2024 expenditures and transfers out increased by 7.89%. This increase in expenditures is due to transfers to capital projects. These capital projects include street improvements and other small capital equipment and small projects. On the next slide, You see it year over year compared to the budgeted amounts, and with also transfers out broken out. The transportation tax revenue increased by 1.6% over 2023, and expenditures excluding transfers decreased $689,000. Here we have the Parks and Rec Fund. You see that huge increase in expenses was there was a lot of capital projects going on in 2024, and they were finishing them up, like the campground project. In 2024, revenues and transfers in increased by $1.6 million when compared to 2023. This was due to grants that we had received. And then 2024, expenditures and transfers out increased by almost $3 million. This chart shows the 2024 actual revenue, expenditures, and transfers out when compared to the 2024 budget and 2023 actuals to the Recreation Fund. The transfers out include transfers to capital projects. These capital projects are campground expansion and the turf renovations are what these transfers out accumulated to go to. Here's the revenue broken down for the Recreation Fund. People wouldn't expect the Recreation Fund to have this many streams of revenue, and it's really great that as a community that we have a revenue generating Parks and Rec Fund. So this is really nice to see and to see where all of that revenue comes from. You can see for 2024, a lot of that revenue did come from grants, with campground being the second most generating revenue source for the Recreation Fund. On the next slide, you'll see the expenses broken out by type, and then you see that the tournaments and the Recplex are the highest type of expense that our Recreation Fund endures. On the next slide, you get utility year-to-date. So 2024 revenues increased by $1.2 million from 2023. 2024 expenditures increased by $2.5 million over 2023. And 2024 ending fund balance is $59 million. Of this balance, $12 million is cash or accounts receivable. On the next slide, here is utility revenue collections, expenses, and transfers out, broken from expenses. Utility revenue collections were 10% greater than what was budgeted for 2024, which is about $1.3 million greater. Expenses came in $1.3 million less than budgeted, which is about 11% less than budgeted expenses. On the next slide, we've also broken down utility revenue by source, with sewer and water being the highest revenue generating for the utility fund. And we get a little bit of money from interest income and penalties. On the next slide, you'll see expenditures by type, and you can see that sewer expenditures are 51% of our overall expenditures in the utility fund. These next slides correlate the vehicle counts with our tax revenue. So our tax revenue we get in from, sales tax revenue comes in 2 months behind what the actual collection is from the consumer, and then tourism tax revenue comes in 1 month from when the consumer pays the tax. So you can see that actually these graphs do correlate. You see that increase, but if we were to move it back 2 months, you can see that it correlates with traffic counts, our tax collections. And then here is our tourism tax by class. And you can see that in August, we had an increase in tourism tax. That would have really been July, right? So our busier months, you can see where it increases. And then for theaters, you can see around Christmas time. And in December and holiday season, you can see that the theaters increased.
Question?
Yes.
On these slides, I know we've always got this issue of when we get the tax versus what's reported. Is this the actual month of the tax or the month that we receive the?
These are the months we receive the actual revenue. Yep.
So the real revenue occurred
2 months prior.
2 months or 1 month
So for
prior?
tourism tax, it's 1 month in advance. For sales tax, it's 2 months because the state collects it for 1 month and then we get it the second month.
So this is 1 month
This is 1 month.
off, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Whatever happened, there was this kind of shock to the system that showed up on reports where, I want to say, campgrounds spiked way up, but theaters went way down. Did we ever find anything out about that? Did it self-correct? What's your perspective?
No, we did not find anything out or any correlation. The thing with this is we only account for it when we get the revenue in, and we're not going out to the businesses and like every time they're 2 months behind saying you're 2 months behind. We record this in the month we receive it. So it could have been January's and then we get all of that in July. We don't track that month over month. We just track it when we collect it and when they're turning in their tourism tax reports. We're kind of looking at this process and seeing how we can update it to better track like actual collections and when we're supposed to be receiving the money and how many people. We do charge penalty and interest on past due things, but that doesn't mean that people are still turning them in when they're supposed to, right? With any sales tax, for that matter. So we are trying to come up with a better process to account for these in the current month that they are due, so we can tell when we should be getting the most tourism tax in and not just based on cash collections.
I think that'd be good. The thing I look at up there, I see theaters, which, you know, is often our lifeblood of what we are as a community. And, you know, if you kind of try to level off those last 4 months on the report up there, it doesn't, it's hard to say exactly, but it doesn't look like it's very positive. It looks like it's kind of a concerning graph. If you'd say, okay, there's some anomalies month to month, and so just average those out across the last 4 months, the average doesn't look good either, if I'm visualizing that correctly. Is that what you see?
Yeah, we actually had a decrease in tourism tax, and you can see that in theaters, that like in December, it kind of compared over 2023, but every other month in 2024 for theaters, it was a decrease over 2023.
So 2 comments, Glenn. I do recall that month you were referring to when the theaters was way down. The following month, it was considerably higher. So I think it was a collection issue.
But now I'm looking at reporting November up there, which would really be October, but November on the chart, it's showing it's quite a bit down there too. You know, so there's these kind of weird things happening. I wonder if we should have a conversation with the theater group, Sue Brown's group, and see if they have any insight into this.
There is a lot of insight and discussions taking place regarding how the theaters are selling tickets and collecting and reporting revenues. And that's something that Clay and I have talked about for a couple of years. We have some proposals of how to address that. That is a significant number, significant.
That would seem like we'd improve it overall, right? That it would just kind of fix things long-term. It's just, I still just find this strange that we have so much variation in a very short period of time because, you know, I get the points you're making about, you know, how we tax tickets and when and all those things, and we've all talked about that before. But this just seems like it's so spiky in there that it's even something beyond that almost,
Yeah.
you know? So I just don't understand it, and I get a little concerned since, like I said, this community is our lifeblood here, and so we, you know, if there's anything we should be doing or be aware of.
Yep, no, and I agree with you. And I agree when you look at even averaging those out, right? It doesn't look good. Yeah. So we will be having continued meetings and with the goal of having some action steps to address that.
From a city perspective? Like city government? I think it's important for me to just remind everybody, we have regular interactions, obviously, with business owners of all types across the city, but when we see a dip in collections from a certain industry sector, we're not financial advisors to businesses or industries. We just take in money and we send out money and, you know what I mean, and invest it around the city. So I just want to be careful that we don't overcommit, that the city's going to somehow figure out how the theaters can generate more revenue. That is not our lane. And so, okay, just so we're clear on that, because all we can do is continue to, which I've been doing, advocate, say, with the CVB on advertising, make sure our shows are featured and there's cheerleading going on for that. But I just want to be cautious that I don't have anybody in city government that would be able to go in and identify practices happening in the theaters that might be impacting the tax collections.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I wasn't implying that either, Kathy, just, you know, I'm looking at it more from our perspective as a city that, we count on our theaters making our tourism happen, and then we count on the revenue to do the things we have to do as a city from those taxes. And when you see taxes starting to do weird things that we can't explain in a core business segment for our city, I just would like to understand, is there something going on that we need to be aware of? Not that it's our job to fix or advise or anything like that, but why the change? Why the sudden change is my question.
And Kathy, and I agree with you, it's not our responsibility to get involved with their businesses. However, there are some reporting models that are taking place that, let's just say, are not standard. Just one example, Glenn's laughing at me. One example is traditionally you would think that theaters sell tickets no matter what they sell them for, and then they report the tax on that. There are some theaters out there that will take a lump sum for unlimited theater seats sold throughout the year. And they do that with some FIT companies and with some timeshare companies. And it is such an extreme. There are theaters that will take, say, I'll give you $25,000 in advance, but I get unlimited seats throughout the year. One theater that I talked to, they accepted $10,000 in advance for unlimited seats throughout the year. And so the reporting of, I don't believe that these theater numbers reflect theater activity. It reflects reporting and deals. I'm not concerned about the deals that they choose to make, but the accountability side.
Yeah, and that makes sense, sir. And doing my research as well, in this role, it's advisory and providing information. Individual businesses will make business decisions, but the effect is on both sides. As I talk to these operators, you'd mentioned some of the organizations, businesses will operate as they may, but the reduction and the value of an individual business's services results in a lower output of tourism tax dollars, which then circles right back and affects our critical infrastructure and marketing. So, but all the while, it's hard for them in the month of January and February when they have a power bill to pay, that they're almost caught in a cyclical process of devaluing their shows. So that's something that certainly needs to be changed, but it would definitely need to be led exclusively by the collective group of theaters. But when they know that it's directly impacting them both in box office sales and then as well as from a marketing and infrastructure standpoint, that's when I think it'll become a reality. Because right now, it almost appears to be a parasitical nature. It's slowly declining some of our operators, and they're just caught in a rut. So it's going to take some out-of-the-box thinking, I think, from those business owners and a little bit of courage to move forward and challenge that elephant in the room that I think you might be alluding to, sir.
Yeah, and I know one theater in particular, when they receive a bulk payment in for advanced seats, that's reported under marketing, not taxable revenues. So there's just some things for us to look at. Yes, Glenn?
Just one more comment. The other thing is when you think about kind of the dynamics of Branson, I'd say we have 3 or 4 theaters that always perform very well, and I think we know who they are without talking about that. But, so that would put some kind of baseline to those tax numbers too. And so then when you see this choppiness at that last quarter, to me, that's even more concerning. I almost wonder, and kind of the administrator's point about our role as a city, I wonder here if, and I realize this is privileged information, but I believe we are allowed to audit tax reports by businesses. And I wonder if in this case, since it's so concerning and so out of norm, if we shouldn't actually ask our staff to consider auditing some appropriate businesses to see, is the reporting correct? And whether we hire a third-party auditor to do that, I don't know what our statutory capabilities are, but just a suggestion, not a requirement, just a suggestion that maybe that would give us the insight to see what's going on / correct what's going on if it's
Yeah.
strictly a reporting problem.
Thank you. Allison, where were you?
Yeah, just on that tax and collection, we can see what businesses are turning into us, and we can see when they're getting late fees, and we can compare that year over year, right, to say what theaters are declining. That's privileged information, but we do have that to be able to tell if people are reporting accurately. We also get the sales tax revenue from the state, so just making sure that people are reporting accurately. Not that we have the capability to really hold them accountable, even if we are auditing them. What is our liability? What is our legal restrictions on the audit if we were to do that? But something we can start tracking as an organization is like what businesses are paying in and what is the decline per theater year over year, if we want to break it down that far.
Yeah.
And then the last slide of this presentation, this is just our sales tax and where it's coming from and what it's going to. You can see it's year over year, and then you see our 1% sales tax with our budget. This is just a high-level overview of everything we went over. These are just some really simplified, straightforward graphs year over year with budgeted funds. Are there any questions on the overall presentation or any capital funds that we have rolling over or expected revenue or revenue for 2024 or expenses for 2024 that we went over today?
I had one question, and it's really just a clarifying question, and I'm not sure if it's for you or Ben. But with our campground expansion, am I understanding it correctly that the additional revenues that expansion's going to bring in versus the expenses for that expansion, we're anticipating a $400,000 a year net increase from that campground expansion?
That's correct. That's what the models, we worked with Cindy before, that's what the models had showed us. Obviously, the economy's changed in the last few years, so we'll probably have to revisit that. But that was certainly what the models were.
Okay.
How we based our pro forma on, right?
Yeah. And so those additional revenues are available to Cindy to be able to use for additional projects, capital?
There's a debt payment in there that we use part of that money for.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we'll be talking to her we'll be talking to all the departments as we move forward with the budget. I say we. We'll be talking to all the departments as we move forward with the budget, but that's one of the big ones, is the campground, what that looks like today versus what we expected before, just what that story looks like. Because
Yeah.
I know things have changed.
And it's the same analogy with the ballpark, the turf.
Absolutely. The
turf project, right?
Absolutely.
So Cindy, once again, thank you very much. It's like Allison said, it's not common for a Parks and Rec department, right, to generate this kind of revenue to be able to reinvest into our community. Thank you. Any committee members have any questions, comments? Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Does that wrap it up?
And then I know, Glenn, that you mentioned the CVB stuff, and it wasn't included on the agenda, but since you mentioned it, we do have a slide, if that's okay to bring up right now, if you would like to see that by category. So we have a slide that shows the year-to-date expenses for 2024 and what category those went to for CVB, which is the last one on that, in that drive. It's not on the sheet. Nope. And then you do have the financial statements actually broke out, but we went over those on the graphs. So the graphs just represent that information. If you guys have any questions about it, get in contact with Kathy, and then Kathy can ask me those questions if you have any questions when you're also reviewing those.
Is that in our pack?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So here you can see the 2024 budgeted amount and then the year-to-date expenses. So traditional marketing, $373,000, media, $1.7 million, meetings and conferences, $82,000. Dues and sponsorships, $252,000. The historic downtown, those expenses went up to just kind of lumped in with traditional marketing and media. and not actually that line when we were like expensing it out and breaking it down. I'm sure that we could have broke it down more just based on the overall invoices that we're receiving. We didn't break them down specifically to historic downtown, and that's something that we can do better on in 2025. And then veterans, $50,790. Chiefs was $222,000. And then the opportunity fund of $51,000 in expenses for 2024 came in at $2.8 million, about $27 million less than budgeted amount for 2024.
Will you be able to do,
27,000, not million.
27,000, yes, sorry.
I was thinking.
will you be able to do a similar report for 25?
Yes, so we get these a little bit behind. So CVB does their expenses and then they submit them to us. They try to submit them monthly. So for the first quarter in the April meeting, I will give you everything that we have reimbursed year to date, and we will break it down similarly if you like this. If this is a fine format, we will continue to do this per our quarterly meetings.
What I would request is, I'm looking at you, but I'm asking Kathy. CVB reports to the TCD in much greater detail. So as they're able to break theirs down in detail, I would ask the same breakdown from the city. Kathy?
So Mayor, what I do is I see the invoices that they submit to us, and those invoices come to us after we've had our regular interactive meetings between myself and Alex and Heather and Pam from CVB. So we're monitoring every single nickel that you're seeing up there to make sure it's being spent accordingly. We're your filter, and then we're categorizing for the high-level overview and oversight. If we start bogging committees and the Board of Aldermen down with the down-to-the-penny invoicing, I think that's kind of delving too far into the weeds when you've entrusted us to be the monitor and the fiscal hawks on making sure expenditures have integrity.
Fair enough. So maybe there's some middle ground. I don't know that we need to get bogged down with the line item, each individual expenditure, but maybe instead of whatever that is, 8 or 10 line items, maybe there could be 20, just break out some of, well, like the media, that's a great example, yes.
Yeah,
Just-
and
and
I
that's-
think that was basically the idea with TCED as well, is that between the media, I'd agree with what Mayor just said, between the media and traditional marketing, some more detail there would be good because it also helps TCED in their budget planning as well. So, and I'd appreciate seeing some detail on that too. And I don't need, not so much from an actual expense perspective, but maybe what's the plan? What's
Yeah.
the marketing plan to be expended on?
So,
Can I say something, Larry? So on the marketing plan and what the upcoming expected expenditures are going to be, that's something that the CVB presents to the board once a year. So you see that all ahead of time from the Board of Aldermen meeting. Is that coming up, Alex, or was that in fall, I think it was, that they brought it to us? Yeah, so that was their marketing plan, and then they lay out what categories they're going to be spending. So all these things that you see budgeted amount, that was already presented to and approved by the Board of Aldermen. But again, I don't want to try to be difficult here at all. I'm happy to oblige to kind of break out some more of those things. But do I think it's an effective use of our time internally to be as detail-oriented as the TCED has chosen to be? I don't think I need to see that, right, to be that detailed, because again, I'm having regular interactions with them, so I know what they're spending money on.
Yeah, it's actually though, the TCED got the financial detail from CVB. So I think if you could just ask CVB to present the same level of detail to you that they present to TCED, and then we show that.
Yeah, they already do that with me, right? Because I'm your designee from the board to be able to implement the contract and make sure they're obliging by all the terms, including the fiscal terms. So they're already doing that to me. Why don't we give this a go at our next meeting, and I'll show you kind of what I'm thinking, and then if there's still further information you all want to see,
Yeah.
we can proceed from there. Is that
you agree?
okay?
Yeah, you agree
Okay.
with that? Yep. Board agrees? I don't think so. I think she'll do it with or without a motion, but we'll see. Next month, we'll be sitting here saying, Kathy, where the heck is that report? You're gonna go, what? Allison, do you have something else?
I have no further information for you guys.
I have no further information. That's, I know nothing.
When's our next meeting, Allison?
April, I'm not sure of the exact date. It's like the second or third week of April is our next meeting where we'll review quarter one, the 24th of April, where we'll review quarter one financials. And then if you guys happen to have any other year-end stuff, let me know, and we can also go over that then.
Is there any other questions, comments from the committee? I really appreciate this information. In my opinion, those graphs go a long way. It gives us as a committee the big picture of how we stand in all the different funds. In my opinion, I'd like to get your opinion. When I read through these, I'm going to say I think our city is in very good shape financially. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I
Healthy
agree.
reserves, we're staying within budget, right? And it's March, so we'll be starting on our 26 budget here pretty soon.
Just a few months.
Allison, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Any closing comments from anybody on the committee?
Mr. Mayor, do you want a motion on this issue of the getting the reports a week in advance, or is that settled, or?
I thought, didn't we agree to that?
We agreed to it in the minutes, but,
Well, let's just do it to clean it up.
okay. So then I'd make a motion that our standing rule for the committee, other than emergency issues, that reporting to the committee be at least 1 week in advance of the meeting.
You okay with that, Kathy? Yeah.
Second.
Well, if she seconds it, she must be okay. Any discussion from the committee?
I think it's helpful just because is our due diligence, and to do that with our other responsibilities that we don't have, it gives us a better chance to give relevant feedback.
You bet. And as we proceed with Allison, and it already sounds like you're coming up with some ideas to make this more transparent and more clear. So as we get these reports, I'm just mentioning this to committee, is I'm getting very comfortable with a really good understanding of where we stand. If, as we get the reports from Allison, if there's things that we as a body want to include, then we'll ask Kathy.
Yeah, and I agree. The reports today were great. Just outstanding reports. I really appreciate the level of detail, the graphics. It was all fantastic, so thank you very much. My only reason for asking for this originally is nothing to do with staff. It has to do with us as a committee, so that we're better prepared when we walk in to ask intelligent questions,
bet.
because I realize staff deals with this stuff every day. You know, we don't. We see it peripherally, and so, you know, we need prep time to be well-informed and ask
Yep.
decent questions, and that's all this is about. So thanks for a very nice meeting today.
Any other questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I sneak one more thing in, sir?
Ooh, that was pretty close. Yes.
I feel like it's something to bring up, so I'll be short. I know I'm going to echo the city's communications on the topic, but I felt like it's relevant since the election will happen prior to our next meeting. A shout out to our Public Works Department and what they do regularly, and with that, we've talked about the importance of tax funding, so without advocating one way or the other, but providing informative information for folks listening, the transportation tax is on the ballot. You do have a reason to go out on April 8th. Encourage everybody to go look at those messages put out by the city and sustain an ongoing revenue source that helps provide us better roads, better traffic flow, and safe walkways. That's an important deal for our tourism economy, and so I felt like I'd make that last plug ahead of the election.
Thank you, Alex. In fact, it's just another continued way that our city has the ability for our roads, water, sewer, our basic infrastructure, to allow the visitors to pay the lion's share of that. Because if that tax didn't pass, I believe the chart I saw showed that that tax generated about $7.5 million, right? So we don't want to stop spending the money on improvements, so the choice would be for our residents to choose. We can have deteriorating services, or the burden would be on the resident. So anytime we can have the visitors pay the lion's share, and in fairness, it's the visitors that cause a lot of our extensive infrastructure demands, right? Water, sewer, roads. So thank you for bringing that up. I really would like the community to look at the city's website for some information on that. It is the only issue on the ballot. And so I'm not sure how that works historically when there's one issue to go vote for a tax. And it's not a new tax, it's just continuing what we've done.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's ongoing. And the other thing, just knowing single ballot issue with an average of 7% turnout on municipal elections, just sharing it with as many people as you can is an important task. And so I'm just encouraging everybody to know you do have a reason to go out, even though the testament to the board's performance that you have uncontested elections is a demonstration of performance. So there is a reason to still go. So I don't want it to be forgotten about. And I think the climate that Alderman Schultz talks about, we need to control the narrative and remind people that there's a reason for this. That some people are apprehensive to the word tax, but proper tax that's implemented accordingly is necessary for us to continue our operations. And so I'm a huge fan of that, and I'm thankful for the CVB's, the Taney County Partnership's efforts on this as well. So just don't forget to vote, please.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same as our community approved a new tax for public safety. Our community sees the results of that approval, right? So, any other comments before we adjourn? Hearing none, I'm still entertaining a motion.
Second.
Kathy, you have to hit your button.
So moved.
Second.